Good morning, welcome to Totem Talks on this rainy January day. I'm pleased to welcome Nick Sims today, who is a Senior Strategy Manager at Linklaters. I've known Nick since 2005 when I was involved in moving him across from a lawyer role at Nabarro, where he was a one-year qualified restructuring lawyer, to Freshfields, where he had a very successful career before moving to Linklaters, reaching his current role last year. Nick, I've invited you here today because I'm very keen to get your thoughts on the challenges of transitioning from being a lawyer into business development or business services, because we at Totem get a lot of interest from lawyers who want to do that. So to start with, would it be okay for you to just quickly give us a run through of your career to date?
Okay. Well, I was at Nabarro Nathanson from 2002. It's now known as Nabarro's. I did my training contract there, which was a 2-year period, qualified, and then went into the finance restructuring team at the firm, where I was there for about a year. And then that was then when I made the transition across to Freshfields Brookhouse Derringer, where I was in a business development role for about 6.5 years, and previously made the move across to Linklaters into the strategy team there, where I've been for about a year now.
Okay. At what point did you realise that you didn't want to do the traditional lawyer role anymore?
I think I always had in the back of my mind, ever since I was at university, that law was a good degree to have, and law school was the obvious next step. But in the back of my mind always, it was a question of, was I going to be in this for the long haul? Did I want to go onto the partnership track? But you get sort of into the routine of following law school, then into the training contract, and then you qualify. And I think it was probably about 6 months into qualification that I realised that whilst I enjoyed the legal environment, I enjoyed the colleagues, I enjoyed the buzz of the deals, I had strengths in other areas which I'd been exposed to in the firm, and I wanted to pursue those further.
Yeah. And what other options did you consider other than business development, which is the route you ultimately took?
Well, that was quite interesting, because going back to this, into the world of the law, I always had the law in my mind at university and at law school, and you don't really think about anything else outside of that sector. So when it came to the stage that I thought to myself, well, I don't want to sort of continue practicing, I looked at a variety of roles or industries, and that ranged from banking to accountancy and politics, and I even looked at teaching as well.
Right. And ultimately you chose business development. And you went to Freshfields, and I remember it very well. What when you got there, I mean, your fundamental skills were to do with being a lawyer. What support did they give you transitioning across into business development?
There was a lot of support. You obviously go through quite a thorough induction, and there's a lot of training in terms of pitching and good client relationship management. There's a lot of databases you need to get your head around that you probably not necessarily had exposure to, certainly on research and analysis. But a lot of it was also on the job, and it was the support of the marketing and business development teams I had at Freshfields, and also the lawyers, that made that transition very smooth for me.
Again, given you'd been a lawyer previously and you moved into business development, you haven't, or still have a number of peers you qualified with and went to law school with. Did you get any sense of what they thought of this move?
Well, I think if you look back at it, it was 2004, 2005. 2005 was the time when I made that move. And at the time, certainly in Nabarro's, there was relatively limited investment into business development and marketing, and the team was relatively small. So for my lawyers and my team, they thought that was quite an unusual move, because they only saw that as a team that sat sort of on the top floor and they didn't know much about. Going to Freshfields, obviously it was a much bigger support structure in that respect, and it was more established. And for the Freshfields guys, it wasn't sort of an unusual move, but for my colleagues at Nabarro's, it was quite strange. But we'll get on to where they've all turned up to later on. Yeah,
and given you've got that knowledge of having qualified, how would you compare the sort of the input and the value you can give to a role like this compared to people who perhaps haven't got that legal training?
Well, it's quite an interesting question, because you get people in the camp that feel that certainly the legal products and the markets are not a prerequisite. But for my feelings and views are that is actually really important. That has given me a huge amount of respect with the lawyers. And certainly there's a lot to learn from the marketing and business support teams, and I'm learning new stuff every week with these guys.
Yeah.
But on the whole, the legal experience that I've had has really given me, I think, a head start in getting that relationship with the lawyers.
Yeah. Everyone talks about the kind of fee earner, non-fee earner thing in law firms, and we get this all the time when we meet people who are perhaps wanting to move jobs, etc. Have you experienced any of that?
Personally, no, and the reason for that is because when I made that transition to Freshfields, the role that I was in, which was supporting the banking and the restructuring teams, meant that you were very much embedded on the practice lines.
Yeah.
And so that essentially means that you're sat with the lawyers, you go to the partner meetings where applicable, you try and attend some of the training if you can, you attend the socials. So right from the very beginning, you're seen as one of them. However, there are functions that don't actually sit within the practice lines, and I can see why sometimes that them and us feeling can materialise. But on the whole, I've never really seen that myself, and I've never experienced that myself. But embedding and building that relationship up from day one is key.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever, in your roles in BD and strategy, had direct contact with clients?
Yes, I have. That for me is a very important part of my role, the client-facing aspect. When it comes to, for me, good business development and execution and finding where the origination is on potential mandates, I certainly spend a lot of time with a wide variety of my counterparts at the other professional service organisations, ranging from the big four accountants to some of the financial advisors. And that for me presents great opportunities to learn more about what they're seeing in the market.
Great. Not many law firms actually have strategy departments. I think Linklater's pioneered that type of role, I think. It'd be quite interesting to hear about what sorts of things you do in that strategy role versus the BD role.
Sure. Well, the Linklaters team, you're right, it's one of, if not the first dedicated strategy team in the global law firm space. And I certainly, when I arrived at Linklaters a year ago, was amazed by, firstly, the variety of work that they do, which can range from high-level strategic projects which relate to the growth of the firm and its internationalisation or globalisation, to quite interesting confidential projects and change management, which require change management, and also business improvement is a big part in the firm these days. In terms of the backgrounds of the team as well, there's quite a lot from management consultants as well, which I've found incredibly interesting, and I've been able to learn a lot from these individuals. But the work is very varied. It all solely relates to improving the efficiency of the firm and also looking at the growth opportunities for the business as well.
Have you, since you went into your first BD role, have you seen a sort of gradual improvement when it comes to the lawyers' attitudes towards business services generally?
I definitely have. I would probably say that the downturn and the sort of the post-Lehman environment has changed everything in law firms. Clients now expect their lawyers to be much more commercial. They know that when they instruct, largely they get excellent lawyers and excellent services, but they also want their lawyers to go the extra mile. They want the lawyers to understand the market, they want the lawyers to understand their business, the products, and as the business support teams have a lot that they can help cushion the lawyers to get that, to sort of bring that gap closer. So I felt that the lawyers certainly rely on business services teams a lot more over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. When you made that transition, I remember we had a conversation about your long-term goals. There is, or there was, and there usually is, some kind of short-term sacrifice when it comes to remuneration. What went through your head when you made those decisions?
Well, I think going back to the year I made that move, which was about 2005, it was very much seen that there was limited investment in the space, but for me personally, I could see a huge amount of opportunity. I knew that law firms had to get more sophisticated in this space. I knew that mandates weren't just coming in as easily as they used to be. And so for me, that function was one where I thought I could add a lot to. It's where I had a lot of good skills that I learned as part of my training contract. And for me, it was a short-term sacrifice for what hopefully would be a long-term gain. And if I can help bring in revenue for the firm, then I'll be rewarded duly for that.
Yeah. We have, as I said earlier, quite a number of lawyers who come to us saying, I'm done with the law, but I want to move, don't want to leave the sector entirely, and I want to move into business services. What sort of tips would you give them when they're looking to pursue that goal?
Well, I would say get to know your business services team and speak to them. I do remember when I wanted to make the move that I actually spoke to the marketing teams at Nabarro's to get to know more about what they were doing.
Yep.
And that for me was quite comforting because some of the work that they were doing was aspects that I really enjoyed. So that was my first port of call. And then secondly, I came to Totem to speak to yourself, Tim, because I'd heard lots of things that you guys had probably one of the best views in the market in the space. And it was good and comforting to know that there was a significant investment going into marketing and business development roles.
Great. Nick, I'd be really interested to hear about what your peers at Nabarro who qualified with you in 2002 or 3 are doing today. Do you still keep in touch with that at all?
Yeah, we sort of still keep in contact from time to time. I think a lot of them have gone into varied roles. Obviously, some of them are still at the firm and they are still in senior legal roles. Quite a lot went into in-house roles as well, which is obviously quite a common move to make.
Yeah.
Some went into banking, and some wanted to dedicate more time to their families. So actually, I think quite a lot moved on from Nabarro's, but they've all gone into varied roles, which have all been equally interesting.
Nick, I'd be really interested to just get a little bit of a feel for what sorts of projects that you've been you're currently doing in your role at Linklaters. Can you give us a sense of perhaps what you've been doing the last few days?
Sure. Well, I think over the last, if I go the last 6 to 12 months, one of the aspects that we've been working on and promoting quite extensively at Linklaters is thought leadership. Yeah. You're seeing a lot of the law firms bridging that gap with the accountants and really profiling their commercial and market views on what they're seeing. And two areas that we covered extensively at Linklaters were the leveraged wall of debt, where we analysed what the wall of debt looked like through a number of databases, and we had our lawyers to comment on what the trends were and what the solutions were. That subsequently made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Another aspect we looked at was the recent China leadership changes. We wanted to explore the growth of the currency and its internationalisation of the RMB, as well as China investing more into Europe and other regions as it goes outbound. So we also did a report on that, just coinciding with the times of the leadership changes, which got launched in November. And in addition to the thought leadership, we're also becoming more aggressive at trying to look at what the trends are and what the pipeline of mandates are for a number of products, and obviously get the lawyers positioned in it as an earliest possible stage.
I'll continue to look at your career with great interest and have enjoyed seeing you succeed over the last sort of 8 years since we originally helped you go to Freshfields, and thank you very much for coming in today. Thank you for watching Totem Talks. We'll be coming back to you soon with some more interesting topics, I hope, and I wish you a very successful February.